Good afternoon, everyone. You have arrived at Distill It, a 360-degree view of life and sports, and we are so excited that you are here today. We're actually even more excited to be here today than normal. I'll tell you why in a minute, but as I have my wonderful, amazing co-host, Ava Schwitzer.
I'm actually excited because I've been able to watch you get really geared up for today's show, which is always fun. I know.
Ava likes to watch my my buzziness I get around the show. We are Distill It, a 360-degree view of life and sports. We are here every other week on the UBN Go network. And we are here because not only are we incredibly passionate about sports, but Ava and I are the proud co-owners of a company called the Distillery Inc., which works with athletes from every level to help them repurpose their life after sports. And we are seriously big fans of just about every sport on the planet, and that's why we're here every other week talking to you guys about it. And we want to say hello not only to Ava, but also to Ryan, our faithful engineer extraordinaire who is with us every other week. Hi, how are you today?
Good.
You doing
I'm
well?
happy to be here, as always.
Good, good. Well, we're going to want to hear a little bit about what's on your mind in sports, because we didn't really have a chance to go over.
We didn't talk about it, yeah.
So what do you think? What's on your mind?
Well, we got to see, we had the final of the big Copa Libertadores, and all of our friends rooting for Boca obviously were disappointed, but River fans are thrilled.
Very thrilled.
Very thrilled.
It was a big topic of conversation over the last week because we have so many friends that are not only big soccer/football fans,
right? But from Argentina, and specifically those who root for River and those who root for Boca. So,
and they were appalled and upset. For those of you who don't remember, didn't hear our last podcast, there was an embarrassing event that occurred right before this big national cup final where fans of one team attacked the other, and there was a lot of damage done to the athletes before they even got onto the field. It was very embarrassing. They actually had to move the game from Argentina to Spain because they couldn't trust the fans.
Right.
And so it's a very sad commentary on a lot of things.
Right.
One of the interesting bits that came out of the conversation was the idea that some of the fans that were interviewed said, I wasn't in my right mind. I don't even know what I was doing.
Sure.
It's like mob mentality.
We've talked about this before. We've had shows on fanaticism, and that's exactly what happens. You get into a zone, there's a mob mentality, and before you know it, you're doing things that you never would have imagined yourself being a part of, and there you are on live TV for the whole world to witness.
Which is awful. What else is going on? Ryan, what's your big sports?
So I watched the boxing match. I don't know if you guys saw that. Tyson Fury with the zombie-like performance. Yeah.
What'd you think?
It was just fun. I like combat sports. We've talked about this before.
Right.
But
and were you rooting for Fury or Wilder?
I didn't really have a dog in the fight.
Right.
But I don't know, to be honest, I didn't get to watch it live, but I just saw the recaps, and I just love when it seemed like it was potential for like possibly a fight of the year or fight of.
Well, I think watching boxers. I mean, I train out of Wild Card in Hollywood. I get to see lots of amazing boxers come in and go, and I got to see Tyson Fury in their training for the weeks before the fight, and the man is massive. The man is massive. So I wasn't there live at the match, but just the idea of these two guys going head to toe, massive guys. These guys are just it's incredible. So I thought it was very cool. See him training, yeah.
And then we just want to say a shout out for the 2018 Heisman Trophy winner, Kyler Murray.
Yeah.
Who
not a big surprise.
Yeah, not a big surprise, although he, may not be going to the NFL. I mean, he already has been drafted into Major League Baseball.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of interesting to have a Heisman Trophy winner that actually might not ever play professional football.
Exactly.
I don't know that it's ever happened before. And maybe now he'll change his mind because he'll probably make a whole lot more money in football than baseball.
But you never know.
But, he is an incredible player. You gotta love him for his athleticism and his, I think, sports intelligence beyond his years. I think he's very, very smart on the field.
Right.
So
yeah.
Congratulations. And now we are going to move on to our, I'm so excited, I almost can't talk, to our guest in studio today. We don't often talk about this, but Aaron and I are actually motorheads. Like, both of us are big racing fans.
Yes.
Mostly Formula One.
I was going to say we won't offend anyone, but we do also prefer Formula One.
Totally.
Over NASCAR.
I'll watch anything, but honestly, sorry, I know it takes a lot of talent to drive.
Absolutely.
Any race car, any car fast.
Yes.
So I'm not negating it, but I'm sorry. It's kind of just in circles. Like, I don't know. I'm gonna, but I love it. I love watching it. I appreciate the drivers, but I'm a hardcore Formula One fan. And I was going to say that, Lewis Hamilton just also won the world championship again, which at this stage I'm like, right, somebody knew better win because it's kind of boring. Yeah. But that's a whole nother show that we can have.
Exactly. Do we ever get tired of watching the same person win year after year? So
when we were introduced to our guest, I was a little bit awestruck and excited for many reasons, not just because of what she does and her talents as a racer, but more because of who she is and what she's done and what she represents for many of us who are, I will say, very close in age and women. And so I'm very, very excited to introduce Lisa Clark. Yay! I have to say it, whose beautiful Ferrari was parked out front. I knew she was here because I saw the car before I saw her.
So great.
Lisa, welcome.
Happy to be here. Thanks for having me, both of you. It's a beautiful day in LA.
Yeah.
Yes.
Lisa, we always like to start off. First of all, I want to do a quick, if you would like to ask Lisa any questions, you can always do so on our Facebook page, or you can call in at 323-524-2599. We always like to ask our guests, Lisa, to just give a little bit of your story to start with. You're a race car driver, but also a mother. And how did you get into cars in the first place? Maybe give us a couple minutes before we launch.
Sure, happy to. Basically, I grew up with just a dad, and so from an early age became a tomboy quite early. And we grew up in the desert in Phoenix, so he was active in doing some desert motorsports with dirt bikes. So from a young age, I had a little dirt bike, or we'd take him in the truck, back of a Ford F-150, and load him up for the weekend, and stop at Kentucky Fried Chicken, get a bucket of chicken, and basically just ride in the desert until the sunset. So it was just really a good way to kind of bond with my dad. And then we just work on cars, our own cars, if they needed repaired or whatever. I'd watch him and pull a speaker outside of the front yard so we could have music, and he could have his little time in the car listening to his favorite music while we're throwing wrenches, and I'm hearing him cuss because it didn't work out how he planned, and learning all of the frustrations of car stuff. But at the same time, that was just my experience, just kind of learning about cars and engines, and it fascinated me from a young age. So I just kind of developed into making that a strong interest of mine through high school and a little in college, and I can go on into all those stories too. But
we might have to ask you at some point.
Yeah, there's some good ones. But that was just kind of my start, is just learning how to basically work on an engine. And I spent one summer with my dad in high school when I got my first car. It was a Jeep. And he said, Lisa, if you pay half, I'll pay half. There's a couple down the street. They're getting divorced. The car doesn't run. We'll tow it home and rebuild the engine. And so we spent a whole summer and doing that, where he took it all apart. And then the thing was, I had to put it all together with him overseeing me. So that was kind of my first, wow, I really learned a lot about cars at that point. And that was my first experience, yeah.
So now you're grown up and you have this love of cars. Did that translate into anything in your youth? Like, okay, now I want to, be a mechanic on a racing team, or did you just have to put it aside because other things happen? What happened?
Pretty much, my dad always had an interest in cars. So growing up, we watched a lot of motorsports on TV, and Indy was a big car event for us to watch together. And I did have kind of a history of I call him my great uncle. It's like a distant, my grandfather's cousin. And he raced Indy Formula One, and he's a Hall of Fame sprint car. And so that was kind of intrigued my dad from an early age, because my dad was named after him too. And my name is the female version. It was Dawn Branson, and I'm Dawn Branson is actually my real name. Lisa's my middle name. So we kind of had that thread of interest in cars because we had someone in the distant family tree that actually raced. Right. So that was always...
And very successfully.
Right. So we did watching sports, watching Indy, and then following that, and then Formula One, which became a big factor in my life. I mean, I'm a big fan, as you are.
Oh my gosh. So I honestly could not put an engine together, but if I'm watching a Formula One race, I can tell you what's going on with almost any part of the car, why it's not performing. And I've had people sit with me go, I didn't know you know anything about cars. I'm like, I don't. I just know Formula One cars. I just know this. Like tire pressure beating on the tap, like whatever it is. Yeah. It's like,
Yeah, they talk a lot during those races. So unless you are completely brain dead, you're going to learn a lot about the whole car dynamics, especially in Formula One.
And the science behind it, I think is amazing.
Right.
Sorry, I cut you off. Go ahead.
No. Anyway, so that was kind of a big factor, is growing up with motorsports, watching it, doing it. I would go out. We watched drag races a lot in Phoenix. You could go out and watch. And there was a woman there, Shirley Muldowney, when I was young.
Of course.
So I would go out and watch her do her thing. And I would look up at that and just think, oh my gosh, that's a woman. And I loved the speed and the sound. And so I got to meet her, which was pretty cool. So that just was another draw for me, seeing a woman that was doing something that nobody did or nobody even talked about. And just kind of when I got into high school more too, friends of mine that were in cars, there was a street in Phoenix called Central Avenue where everyone would bring their really cool cars and they'd cruise Central. Yeah. So I started hanging out with some of my guy friends and fixed up my Jeep really kind of cool, and would buy little pieces with my job to chrome certain parts of it and get big nubby tires and cruise Central with my guy friends and so that was always really fun too, is just doing that, doing car shows. And they had mud bogs in Arizona where you just basically rage through mud, your big trucks, and that was just kind of another kind of fun sport. Anything that had to do with cars, I was like, yeah, I'll try that. Sure, yeah. So for me, the transition into sports cars came when I was leaving the dirt bikes world. I always wanted a sports car but couldn't afford it. And I was in college, early college, and I had a dirt bike, of course, but I got this one street legal, and then I had my Jeep. And my dad always said, you can't ride the dirt bike in college, just keep it and use it just when you're going to do something on the dirt. Well, I had it street legal, and one morning I thought, you know what, I'm going to go to school in it and just do a quick run. I had to pay a parking ticket. Well, I ended up having a pretty bad street accident. A woman on the road didn't see me and took me out pretty badly. But the good out of that was I had a small settlement that came about 2 years later, and that's when I bought my first sports car. And it was a Porsche 914 2-liter.
Nice.
And so I joined the Porsche Club, started doing little road rallies, autocross, in parking lots where they put up cones, and, you try to beat your best time and beat your friends.
Sure.
And that was really exciting to me because now I had a challenge with other people that loved motorsports too. So it puts you in a different world than when you're just raging in the desert with your friends on dirt bikes. And but life happens, and I graduated college and still kind of was doing car things, but nothing no racing or anything like that. I thought, I'm way too old. That's never going to happen. Raised a family, got married, raised a family, and have 2 beautiful daughters. But as my daughters were getting older at the time, we were able to afford where I could maybe just kind of dabble in trying something in the car world. And so my husband and I had talked about it, and he said, why don't you give it a try and just kind of just have some fun with it? So I was like, really? Are you sure? So I ended up going through all the Ferrari programs. I had a Ferrari, and the person that I became close with in the Ferrari dealership had told me, Lisa, why don't you try this? Ferrari offers these programs around the country, and you can really learn how to become a better driver.
Yeah.
So I took a course, and then I completely got addicted and took another and went through their whole series of programs where you kind of can graduate into racing in Ferrari, into a series. But I didn't feel confident enough in my abilities, and with, I'm not in the younger end to jump into racing.
Do you mind me asking how old you were when you just kind of jumped into racing?
Oh my God.
I'll say my age if you'll say yours.
Let's just say it was after the 40s.
Okay. Well,
Right?
the reason I bring it up is I just, I think Ara and I are also in a situation where we're doing something that if you had said to me 25 years ago when I was in my 20s, you'd be doing vidcasts and, broadcasting and radio shows and all of it, I would have laughed.
Sure.
And this is something that we're passionate about, especially in terms of sports. And now it's like,
here you are.
Here I am in my 50s as well, doing something that I never thought I would do.
Right.
So I think it's hugely inspirational to talk about it and to not be, we can laugh about our age, but to acknowledge that you don't have to be 20 to do things that are a little bit scary because they could, there's consequences if God forbid something happens. I mean, if somebody knocks me off the chair here, I'm going to be okay.
Hopefully.
My ego might get hurt, but I'll you're in a car that's going super fast and they're around people who you can't control. So the fact that you took that on, later in life is admirable and interesting.
Sure.
Well, I think we all, as we age in life, we tend to put ourselves in a box in that age range and think, okay, I'm this old, so now I should be doing these things. And it's hard to not do that because everyone's kind of going in that direction. That's how our society is. And especially in being a woman, and you have an interest in something that maybe not a lot of women are interested in, and you're thinking, well, why do I have to shut that down?
Yeah.
Because it's my life. It's something I want to try to improve on. And so for me, in doing that, I thought with Ferrari, I can do this. And sure, I'm older than a lot of these guys that are racing, and I'm not looking to be top of the tier like them. It's not going to happen, obviously. But if I can challenge myself, and at the same time, I've raised 2 daughters, and kind of just show them like, hey, you can do it. I mean, look at me. I'm a woman, and there's hardly any of us around here that are doing what I'm doing, but I'm doing what I want to do and what I love, and I want you to have that desire in life and not feel like you can't.
Sure.
So I felt like I had to kind of represent them as well.
Yeah.
And then in doing that, you start getting feedback once I did start racing more and getting approached by women and even husbands of wives and boyfriends that are just going, oh my gosh, my wife is so inspired by you. How can she says she wants to get on a track someday, but I don't know, is that safe or whatever? And but it's just hearing this feedback and them just going, gosh, you can do this. Wait, and women going, wait, you're doing this, and you're how old?
Right.
Sure.
So.
I just want to add that I went on I'm gonna slay the way this is supposed to be said. So please, anybody who speaks Italian and Ferrari in particular, please, I'm sorry in advance, but the Corsa Clienti,
right,
which is the the Ferrari challenge that you are a part of, right? So I went on their website.
Right.
And I just looked up drivers. I wanted to see,
sure.
right? And as you scroll through the many drivers that are participating around the world, I want to just note that many of them look like they're older than you. Must be, because they look like they're. So I think
they look like they're older than me.
At least some of them. I mean, they look like they're in their 60s and 70s, like some of the guys.
Yeah, there's some out there. There are, and which is amazing to me.
Yeah. But also, there was only I think I went through the whole list. There was only like 3 other women besides yourself
in North America,
around the world, because I think it was pulling up. No.
Well, in the series that I race in with Ferrari, you've got North America, Europe, and Asia, and now the UK is going to be jumping in because it's just really grown in popularity. But in Asia there are a few, and then Europe there are a few other women too. So in the series, we don't all compete internationally until the finals.
Okay.
So I'm just competing in North America. There's 3 of us this season, right?
But still, those numbers are so low. I mean,
no, but that's what I'm saying.
It's a handful.
Right. Right, and then you've got like 43 men.
Right. But that's my point, is that, it's like when I hear you say, and it may not be possible that you get on the top podium, but I'm looking at I'm looking at some of the drivers going, and why not? Because, it's.
Well, there's different levels in this series too, right? You've got different.
That's true.
Different.
I did see the guy.
Classes.
They weren't dividing you up by classes. It was just
right overall.
Overall,
sure,
yeah,
sure, yeah.
But I feel like it's notable that really there's only about 3 women in the entire country.
It's crazy.
So why though? Why is it just not, and we do see this across sports, that it isn't like, basketball, even for professional women in this country, struggles. Soccer is not as popular for women. So what do you see that's, maybe, yes, general across the board, sports is not as popular with women as it is with men, but is there something that's more specific, more unique to racing, you think, that sort of keeps women at bay? Is it just sort of the,
Well, I think if you've not grown up in motorsports, I think it's hard to get a connection there. And even with men that, I talk to that know nothing even of Formula One, right? They don't know anything about it. So there's got to be some type of tag there, I think, that's going to attract a woman in that industry. Although, as far as not in the race, not the driver aspect behind the curtain, though, there's a lot of up-and-coming women in Formula One, even engineers.
Right? Yes.
So
they're
there.
And team
they're
principals.
And team principals, right. So they definitely are out there, and they're remarkable women. But, it's hard to kind of draw that in. And I think to reach out to women in that industry, one thing good about with Ferrari, since being with them, is they are recognizing women in racing, which is great. So they're calling us out, even though I'm not in the top, the top 5 for sure in my level, even top 8. But they still they'll put me in a category of women. So overall, who won the race, the podium, and then they'll acknowledge the woman that won against the other 1 or 2 women, right?
Sure.
So they still podium you, and that's great for women in motorsport that they're acknowledging that. It's like, you're right, I'm not getting the top 3, but I haven't been racing since I was young like them either. So I'm at a different range anyway, but you're at least acknowledging that. So it's good to see, and I know Penske's really starting to bring it to the forefront too, women in motorsport. So it's good to see that they're saying, hey, it can happen, and we need to kind of support that. And I don't really feel in the industry, I've not seen any negativity towards myself, really.
Yeah.
And I think if you put yourself as a woman in a sport, in a male-dominated sport, you do have to go in humbly, because if you start, kind of treading with too strong of yourself around men in an industry like this, you're going to get knocked down in some way. So you've got to just kind of enter in saying, hey, I'm not here to challenge you. I'm challenging myself. But at the same time, I deserve respect just as you do. And they really, they treat you that way.
Well, I think it's fascinating, though, that motorsports actually are one of the few sports that doesn't necessarily separate out men and women.
Right.
Right? So you're going to drive, you're going to drive.
Right. You're in a car, whether I'm a girl or a guy.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
So what are the advantages then, if you would say it compared to men, about being a woman in a car or driving? Do you feel like there's any competitive advantages, meaning, stronger in core, faster in, reflex time? Like, do you feel that there's any physical advantage for a woman being in a car versus a man?
Well, I hear from my coaches like differences. Like they always say, it's great coaching a woman because she actually, she listens. And she doesn't really let her ego get in the way. She'll actually listen and download it and go out there. And it's easier for her to do it, where with a man, he's going to fight it and go, well, I don't know, I'm feeling this. So the challenges are different there. I think the testosterone is definitely a good thing to have in motorsports because I think it takes them to that extra aggressive state where women don't really naturally have that. So competitively in racing, I see that challenge a little with myself, where I have the aggressive nature up to a certain point. Sure. But I see them taking it that extra blindly going for it move, where I would be a little more reluctant and then try to shoot in there. So that's a little challenge, I think, as women in motorsports, that I kind of find they kind of take a little tentative step back for a minute first.
Sure.
Before they jump in.
Do you think that's a natural thing to women, or do you think that's maybe a motherhood thing?
That's a good question.
Yeah. Are you thinking
honestly? Are you thinking about your kids?
You're right.
Yeah. I mean, I don't. When you're in the car, you're not really thinking about anything but finishing, getting the car back safely, and
But I mean, instinctively, that's what I'm wondering. I mean, of course, you may not be thinking about it
Right.
consciously, but like if there's a natural,
like, save myself or something. You mean?
Don't die so that I can watch my kids walk down the aisle. No, I'm serious. Like, it's like if I do something wrong, I'm not gonna here I'm
but
not
that's
putting
an age
myself
factor. I don't think that's a male or female.
Oh, really?
I think as we get older, we start feeling
Thinking
more
about
vulnerable
that's
about
interesting.
life, right? Where when you're younger and you're racing, like look at Verstappen in Formula One.
Oh my God!
I mean,
he's like 18.
They're all going, "What, dude? What are you doing?"
Because he's not even being smart.
He's not being smart, but look at where it's got him.
Right.
Sure.
Where if it was the older guys, they're not gonna be taking those chances because, like Kimmy, he's like, I'm not gonna do that, So I think
he's
that's
still
a big factor.
he still drives
Kimmy?
aggressively. He's not like
Oh yeah. He's
By the way,
amazing.
he's one of my favorite. Like, I think I'd fall over if I met him in person. I literally think I would fall over.
I did.
Well, then you must meet him. I must witness that.
No, you have to. We went to Spa.
Oh, okay.
As guests of McLaren when he was driving. It's him and David Coulthard who were driving for McLaren. This was years ago now, and I have pictures of me and Mike in front of his car because we were walking the pit and stuff like that. And nobody thought, it was kind of like Kimi was at probably his best. It was the year after that he won the World Championship by a complete fluke of, I don't know how he did it, but he did. Anyway, nobody thought he was going to win that race, and he started, I think, in 4th or 5th position, and then he ended up winning that race. And I'm like, only it's my guy, but I have the picture of me in front of his car before he won. It was like,
yeah, you have to meet him.
That's so great.
I would love to. Honestly, I think he is brilliant. I think in his day, he was a super smart driver. Like I really liked watching him. Jenson Button too is my other favorite for many reasons.
Yeah, we get to open up for them in Montreal. We open up for them. So Kimi and Kimi and his guy.
Oh, on Ferrari?
Yes.
Sebastian Vettel?
Sebastian. Oh,
you mean the guy who almost won the World Championship this year?
And I'm like, who is that guy? So we got to...
Who should have won this year? Who should have won?
Too many mistakes.
I know. He made some stupid mistakes this year.
Big time. But we got to spend a little time with them for our photograph session with all the drivers. They come out. And Kimmy's just such a crack up because Sebastian's great. He's like, hey, and he came and signed my suit. And Kimmy is standing by me with a picture, and I thought he's not going to say anything because that's just his nature, right? So he just kind of has his little smirk on his face. So I'm like, what the heck? I'm just going to say something to him. So I go, hi, Kimmy, Lisa. And he kind of looks at me and just gives me this smirky look and just looks me up and down slowly like, a woman.
Yeah.
That kind of Kimmy look.
Yeah.
And he's like, nods his head.
Nice.
Holds out his hand and shakes his hand like, okay, you passed, basically.
I'd be passing out. And he'd probably be shaking his head going, come on. Can't you hold your composure? What's wrong with you?
Yeah.
So going back to motherhood, I'm curious to hear, what did your daughters think of you going to racing? And have you passed along your love of cars and racing? And
I have the two daughters. The younger one had an interest. Mm-hmm. And I did a go-kart series too, and I was doing my preparation to kind of get to the Ferrari Challenge. Sure. I did some other racing. So I took them both out on some of my go-kart days because they're like, oh, Mom, we want to do this. Da, da, da. I'm like, okay. So the older one was a lot more tentative. It's just not, she's like, oh, this is fun, but okay, where are we eating for lunch?
Yeah.
And the younger one liked it. I could tell, and she's a fairly good driver. So we put her in a Bondurant program just to help her to become a better driver when she was younger. So she did a couple days there, and she was just like, Mom, I really like this. This is great. And I just kind of felt like, let's focus on school and make this kind of a side hobby. So I kind of put it in the background a bit because I really wanted to encourage her, graduate, go to college.
Yeah.
I really think for a profession to become a professional woman in racing, it's such an uphill battle. I do know some that are struggling to get their younger girls that I highly support, and I see their struggles, and I just think I don't really know if I want my daughter to do that, but I know if she really has the passion, hey, make it a hobby,
right? Yeah.
Make it a strong hobby in your life, but maybe. Or you can even later, if you decide that's it, that's all I want to live for, then okay. But I just didn't want to start her on that road because it's very hard today, even as a young male. I sponsored one a little bit, and just watching his journey and his struggles, and he's an amazing driver. He drives IndyCar.
Yeah.
What's the big struggle? I mean, what's the big struggle for a woman, or maybe start with a man, like you're saying, this young man? Money. It's always about money. It all comes
down to money. And, Formula One's a big showing of that. Mm-hmm. I mean, there are some really good drivers in Formula One and with a lot of money and that are able to bring a lot of money to the table to get there. And there's some drivers in Formula One that aren't that great, but they were able to bring a lot of money to come to the table.
That bothers me a little bit, by the way.
But that's...
Because a lot of times those drivers who aren't so great, who can bring a lot of money, they do stupid things on track, which causes ridiculous accidents and a waste of cars, which is annoying. Mm-hmm. I mean,
a lot of money lost.
A lot of money lost for the sake of money from somebody who doesn't really drive well. I feel like it's one of those things where, and maybe that's a fault of how the teams are built in racing. Do you know what I mean? Like how they're put together and the ownership and all of that. But I don't think it's really particularly good for the sport. I wish there was I know there is a feeder system into all racing, go-kart and all of that. But I wish there was more of a way where it wasn't dependent on the driver bringing, a big check to the table.
Right.
Right. But that's somebody's got to pay for, if you don't have the big sponsors, especially if you're not in a manufacturer series, right? That money's got to come from somewhere.
Right.
So that's where everyone's going to lean. And then the driver, then they pull in the driver. So,
but couldn't they build it from the team perspective and let the teams focus on the money and let the drivers be a little bit less?
Yes, and they do that too as well. But to get a young driver started and rolling and noticed and recognized, it's a lot about networking themselves and putting themselves out there and trying to get a seat in a car that they can race and actually have a good record with that car, which is unfortunate too. They can be a great driver, and you look at like Alonso, and he has, right?
Ever since he won his 3 world championships,
you
and then he just
can't get anywhere because the car,
right?
And
And he was on the best teams at just all the wrong times, right?
Right. So a lot of these drivers that are out there now that are excellent, amazing drivers, but they can't get the attention because they're not being put in the proper team car or whatever. It's sad for them, and so they're struggling. They're trying to coach. They're doing anything they can to get some. While when they aren't racing, they need everyone needs to make a living.
Sure.
And is there so there's that for women that is the level playing field. Is there something that's even harder for a woman then on top of it?
Oh, sure. Because especially a lot of the big sponsors in pro, I mean, I'm amateur, so it's a different thing for me, but it's hard to find a sponsor for a woman in motorsports. And if they're not a big name, chances are the man's going to get the seat because there's no fan base there. And that's, like I said, there's not enough women. Who's watching racing? Well, it's not women. So
NASCAR, I would beg to differ.
Yeah.
NASCAR is a different breed. You can't really. It's like its own planet.
Right.
But in the GT series, I mean, there's women out there doing it, but there's not a lot of them. So the draw's not there. The fan base isn't there. So the sponsors are going to go. We're going to go with him, and a woman has to have a really good record too in racing. She's got to really show and stand out. And if that's not really happening for her, it's going to be harder for her to get the sponsorship.
So as an amateur, and forgive me for not knowing this, do you have to also go after sponsors to support, or it's when you're amateur, it's like on you, you do it, you show up?
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. And you can't you can't get paid or anything like that. So
they don't have purses for the
no,
competitions.
No.
It's just pride and glory and the big trophy, right?
Right. Lots of trophies that you go, where does this go now? Where do I put this? But it's an accomplishment.
Right.
It's more of like a self, fulfilling challenge that you feel good about, and that's about as far as you can take it. And then you pay the bills on your racing and just go, okay, it's worth it.
And at least there's consistency because we're hearing some of the same issues.
It's kind of like the women. We say it all the time.
We think about
the WNBA.
And in terms of success and the fan base and the numbers, we know that by far the U.S. women's national soccer team is much more successful than the men's team ever has been.
Right.
And the pay disparity is still there, and the facilities are still, huge difference, and they just don't get the money the way that the men do and the accolades. And so it's whether you're performing or not, and whether the fan base is there or not, doesn't seem to really be,
I have new business ideas for us, Ara.
Do you?
Yes, I think we should be like talking to sponsors and creating a fund that funds, women in sports.
Right.
Because, the reality of it is that at the end of the day, and this has been proven over and over again, and I'm going to quote our friend Sarah Lassick, who works for Adidas, was on the show, and is also, she doesn't drive competitively, but maybe she does actually, but she loves cars and she goes out and races, that, women are really the buying power of everything.
Absolutely.
So the fact that they don't want to sponsor to us, it's like
boyfriends and they're buying for their sons. So really, at the end of the day, you
really should be for women.
Right.
Yeah.
Another thing I was talking to a friend about is here you have these beautiful sports cars that people are driving around the city, right? And most of them are men that are driving them. So it's really interesting to me that I was saying to my friend, going, you do these commercials, these manufacturers, Ferrari, Lamborghini, whatever, Aston Martin, and there's always men driving the car. It's like when I drive my sports car around town and someone walks up to me, I'll see like a woman and she'll just look at me like she'll be with her husband or something, and she'll just see double take and see it's a woman, like, hey, and he'll kind of like look at the car like, oh, that's cool. But he kind of, it's in a way where she has this like awakening, like, oh, wait, I can drive that car. And he's just kind of like, no, I like the car, that's something I would drive.
Yeah.
Where women can drive and they can drive the cars, so why aren't manufacturers doing commercials with women getting out of a Lamborghini or a Ferrari?
Yeah.
Because I think there's definitely a market there for it, and
I think they're
not exploiting it in any sense.
Sure, I think there's a huge market, and I So we had the pleasure of working with Ferrari. My husband and I were telling you about it. This was years ago, and we were on the team that built the Ferrari theme park in Abu Dhabi. Oh. And so as a part of that, we got to have a lot of meetings in Maranello, and it was probably one of the really most fun times of my entire life, as you can tell, because I'm a Formula One fan anyway. Right. But it was interesting because this was right around or right before the time that the California came out, right? So they hadn't launched it, and we were sitting with a bunch of the marketing guys, and they were talking about the fact that the California was meant to be more attractive to women. Mm-hmm. It was supposed to be like that kind of Ferrari that they felt women could wrap their heads around, as if we couldn't wrap our heads around any of the other ones.
Right. Yeah.
And, and that's kind of how they were veering to market to it. And I liken it to the idea that many companies who manufacture products, when they pink their items to make it attractive to women. And I think in, the car manufacturing world, in that luxury elite car manufacturing world, they're in that mode of, well, what can we do to kind of pink it, instead of actually thinking that either it doesn't matter because our cars rock and we should just be talking to women. Yeah. Like they're trying to think that we need something different, that
special,
we don't want all the horsepower, that we don't want to go 150 miles an hour, that we don't want that we're afraid of stick shifts, or
we don't want the cool looking car.
We don't want the cool looking car, or the really hot jacket that you're wearing. Oh, by the way, which I'm loving.
Oh, thank you.
But do you know what I'm saying? It's like, having been around it and hearing the conversations.
Sure.
Like I said, the California is a beautiful car, but I mean it's definitely got the rounder edges. Yeah, it's kind of got like the sleeker.
It reminds me of what Sarah was saying on the show. Remember, she kept saying shrink it and pink it.
Shrink it and pink it.
Just take the men's cut, shrink it, make it pink.
Right.
There you go. We need something special and different.
I actually had a California.
They're beautiful cars.
Yeah, and my husband totaled it.
Oh, thank you very much.
I didn't wreck the car. He did. So there you go. Right.
So great.
And by the way, it's one of my favorite. I love the California. It's a beautiful
car.
Street car. Yeah, it's a great street car. But it was very interesting because it was kind of characterized, at least in a around the table talking about it.
Sure.
As that. And God forbid a woman would think a Lamborghini is awesome.
Yeah. Right. But I am seeing more Porsches being driven by women around
that's
town lately. So I'm going, that's a good thing.
But what model? Is it the Cayenne? Is it the,
it's not the
what's it called?
GT3 RS or anything. No.
It's the 4-door.
It's the, that's big, the Panamera.
the SUV.
The family.
The family.
The family one, yeah.
No, but listen, Porsche actually.
Not that you're turning your nose up at the car.
I'd drive one.
Exactly. But
no, but
just observing.
But the point is that they also, but they took a really defined, like they drew a line in the sand with their cars and said, we are going family.
Yeah.
And by the way, my husband Mike, every time he sees one, it's like he thinks it's the most disgusting thing ever that Porsche went that direction.
Right.
Because it's like, how can you make a family car out of a Porsche? That's not what they're supposed to be.
Yeah.
But you know what? Why not? They
if there's a market,
they're selling
exactly.
But did you see what they did last year? Porsche in Germany on their big sign. They put how you spell Porsche, and it's all in lights. In their industry area. Anyway, they took out all the other lights on Porsche except for they left S, H, and E lit.
Well, see.
So that was pretty cool.
That's very cool. But again, I think they decided early on. And I'm going against what I'm saying. They went early on and said, okay, let's do the family thing, and that's what we're going to get the she around. Yeah. They're not expecting, us to drive the family car like 150 miles an hour.
Yeah.
No.
I wonder if they do. Do they do club races with the car? Yeah. What do you think?
That would be interesting.
Have you ever seen it?
With maybe a baby on board sign.
Souped up with all the cool rims and everything.
Exactly. Yeah. That's great.
So in your kind of journey back into racing, what for you is like the hardest part? Like what is it that kind of despite how fun it might be and how much you love it, like what's the for you?
like when I'm on the track feeling, are you thinking?
Anytime, because a lot of women are afraid to do, like I said, things that they've had in their back in their mind. It's a dream. I can't do it.
Oh, right.
But even though you've kind of overcome that and you've decided to go for it, there still has to be those moments, right, where you go,
oh, sure.
Like, what am I doing here?
Right. I think you feel that anxiety, anxious feeling definitely has to come across because your adrenaline's going.
Mm-hmm.
And in talking to some of my teammates and everything, I mean, we all have it. You really, when you are in the car and you're not thinking about anything, and sometimes distractions can come in your mind and you have to immediately remove them because it's not a good environment to be in for very long. A lot of it has to do, as far as in a race situation, the beginning of the race is, I think, everyone's most kind of angst time, those first 10 seconds, because a lot can happen there. And your adrenaline's already going even before the flag drops. So those are the moments that you're working up to pretty much all day before the race, knowing that's the moment.
Yeah.
And then really from there, you're not thinking, the fear factor really isn't, it's gone.
Sure.
Because you're in a different mindset, and now it's survival of the fittest for the car and yourself. And then at the same time, because the sport, the level I am in, it's called gentleman racing. So whatever that's supposed to mean, because that really doesn't apply.
Right.
I mean, that goes out the window quickly with a lot of these guys. So that really doesn't exist. I don't know. They need to change that term. So you're really the fear factor. I don't really think about it very much once the race starts. And
because believe it or not, we're almost...
Oh, well, before we end, though, we have to ask about fitness then, because for so many people who don't get car racing, they think, first, how is this a sport? B, you're sitting in a car, so what exactly makes you athletic? So can you talk to us
And then I have one more question if we have a couple more minutes.
Okay, fitness is a factor, and there are men drivers out there that aren't in great shape, and I don't know how they're doing it. I mean, I actually injured my back in August testing in one of the cars, so it's all about core strength, and your cardio and endurance level has to be up, because otherwise your brain needs fuel, and it's just not going to exist out there for very long if you're not fit.
Yeah.
So how often do you train, or do you train in spurts leading up to races, or is it a constant?
Constant.
Yeah.
And cardio is a big factor. I think has to be on the forefront.
Mm-hmm.
And then, food, nutrition.
Yeah.
And you can't go drinking at the bar and everything like that and then expect to have a weekend of racing. You just can't. There are guys that I don't know how they do it, but I'm not one of those people.
Well, because you get extremely dehydrated.
Right.
I mean...
It's very much so. Just sitting, and you think you're just sitting in the car, but you're really not. Your heart rate is up. You're sweating.
You're in the flame resistant suits. It's not like you're wearing like a bathing suit.
There is no air going on whatsoever.
Yeah. It's not like you have the air conditioner going and it's like this is so cool.
And the tension's in your body, right? So it's trying to kind of just keep everything at a lull, but so your body's constantly working.
Sure.
And it's very important.
I'm not going to get the number right, but I remember reading Formula One racers lose 10% of their body, the water in their body. There's like some crazy number of how much they sweat and how much they lose in water during a Formula One race.
Oh, the G's they're pulling in those
huge.
cars constantly.
Yeah, I don't know how they do it. One last question. So what advice or tip would you give to women who are in their, let's say, 40s and 50s and beyond for kind of chasing their dream as you did?
In motorsports?
In anything.
Right. I like the in anything.
Yeah, in anything.
That's really, it's all finding your passion. And if you have a passion, I just would say find a way to get it. Find a way to get there and make it a journey for yourself and challenge yourself. And it's just that self-fulfillment feeling that you want, because that's really what I think we all need to feel within ourselves. And I love inspiring women and young girls out there and just saying, hey, I'm doing it at my age and I picked it up later in life. So don't think it's ever too late.
Great advice for us as well, and I really appreciate it. Thank you so much, Lisa, for coming in today. We were really very inspired, and like I said, it's one of our favorite topics that we haven't talked a lot about, so I'm very excited.
And for those of us who want to follow your career and see what's next and how well you're doing, where can we find you?
Well, I'm still making some decisions for this next season, but I might do another season here with Ferrari. So that's kind of, I'll know more by end of December.
Okay.
But that's... Look for me there at the moment. That's what my plan is right now.
And you have a website or an Instagram account where can people find
I'm Racer Mom, racer.mom. So that's my Instagram. And I'm on Facebook too.
We'll follow you there. Yeah. Thank you, Ryan, so much.
Of course.
We are back next Tuesday. Yeah. We've got another, we've been doing back-to-backs a lot, which are amazing. As always, we like to share that you can find us at thedistilleryinc.com. We are also on Facebook at The Distillery Inc. We are on iTunes, Stitcher, CastBox, iHeartRadio, Spotify, and Google Play now. So you can download, like us, share us. We really appreciate everyone who joined us today, as always, and we will look forward to seeing you next week.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.